What's happening, guys and girls? Acrinator here, and welcome to another episode of World of Warcraft Dungeon Overview. Real quick before we get started, I am very sorry for this episode coming out so late, but if you do follow me on Instagram, you'd likely already know that I've been fighting off allergies as of late, and I just completely lost my voice for a couple of days there. You still might be able to hear the congestion in my voice now, so this is sort of a shameless plug, but also a public service announcement for the channel. If you notice that any of my uploads are later than they're supposed to be, and you're curious as to what happened, then you can just go to my Instagram to see my perspective. Anyways, this episode will be going over the first of the troll dungeons from Cataclysm, and no, I'm not referring to these dungeons being a pain in the ass, although with the size and scale of these instances, you wouldn't be wrong for thinking of that. However, we'll be going into the specifics a bit later on. For now, we'll need to cover the basics of Zul'Aman. I'll be guiding you through this ancient empire with my paladin you see here, so with that being said, let's dive straight into it. I hope you like dungeon lore, because there's a hell of a lot more of it than the individual boss lore this time around. Zul'Aman was once the great capital of the Amani troll tribe, from which they ruled the entirety of modern-day northern eastern kingdoms. So great was the extent of their reign that the trolls simultaneously threatened the livelihoods of both the high elves of Quel'Thalas and the original human settlements of Strom. Individually, the elves and humans faced extinction, but together they stood a chance. The high elves sent emissaries to Strom with an offer they knew the humans couldn't refuse: aid the elves with their war against the Amani, and they would offer to teach a select few in the arcane arts in return. The humans were not fools, as they knew the trolls would turn their attention to Strom the moment Quel'Thalas burned to the ground, and they accepted the Quel'Dorai's offer. Together, with the combined might of both fledgling empires, the trolls were beaten back to the walls of Zul'Aman. Their great city was besieged, and the Amani Empire had finally fallen. The smaller sub-tribes scattered about their former territories, losing much of their hold over the region in the process. Not until centuries later, around the time of the Second War, would they recover to even a fraction of what they once had. And even then, their leader at the time, the infamous Vol'jin, realized that they needed help from the Orcish horde if they wanted to truly crush the elves. Unfortunately for the fractured Amani Empire, the war didn't go in their favor, and the Amani once again were forced to disperse with what little power and influence they still possessed. As you can imagine, after countless years of merciless treatment from the Amani, the High Elves didn't take too kindly to the trolls once the tables were turned. This was doubly true for Zul'Jin. The warlord of Zul'Aman was captured and tormented for an unknown amount of time by the elves, who took his right eye amidst other unspeakable acts of torture. When his captors were distracted, Zul'Jin took the opportunity to cut off his left arm in order to escape, giving him the opportunity to return to his shattered home in an attempt to rebuild. For many years after, the Amani tribe lived relatively quiet lives to any onlookers. They were scattered and defeated, a shadow of their former selves, or so most thought. In reality, Zul'Jin was gathering his forces, slowly but surely building up the Amani's resources enough to fight yet another war against their sworn enemies. Around the time of the Burning Crusade, Zul'Jin had finally gathered a fighting force he was confident in, only to discover that the former High Elves, now Blood Elves, had joined the new Horde. While the enigmatic leader of the Amani didn't place much faith in Orgrim Doomhammer of the original Horde, he never truly considered them hated enemies. Now, this, on the other hand, changed things. If this new Horde dared to align with the Elves, then they would die like the rest of their misbegotten allies. If you know anything about the story of the Burning Crusade, first of all, my condolences, but second, you probably know how the original version of this dungeon went. Champions of the Horde went to war one last time with the tattered remains of the Amani Empire to finally put the old dog Zul'Jin to rest. Their dark rituals were stop leaders beheaded and city broken for the final time. Or so we thought. Yeah, that's right, we're only now getting to the modern day timeline for this dungeon. This has got to be the longest lore section I've ever done for an instance, and this is just the goddamn Cliff Notes version. There's a lot more behind this place if you're interested in reading the novels. Anyways, during the time of the Cataclysm, King Rastakhan of the Zandalari tribe, progenitors to all trolls, sent out the Prophet Zul to reunite the various tribes, including the Gurubashi, Darkspear, Sandfury, Drakari, and Amani. While the Darkspear stayed faithful to the Horde, the rest followed Zul's lead, gathering resources with their newly rediscovered allies for an assault on the whole of Azeroth. This time around, the Blood Elves aren't taking any chances in permanently dismantling the Amani, so much so that the Ranger General of Silvermoon, Halderon Brightwing, called upon Vol'jin and his Darkspear, as well as Varisa Windrunner of the Silver Covenant, to aid his rangers in this battle. Similarly, champions of both the Alliance and Horde have been invited to fight against the Troll Menace before things can get too far out of hand. Zul'Aman is a level 85 dungeon with a heroic mode located located in the southeastern portion of the Ghostlands. Its location does mean that you can't fly there even if you wanted to, and that it's planted firmly in Horde territory. But it shouldn't be too hard to get there regardless. There is a Flight Master planted directly outside the instance itself, which most Horde players should have by default, and Alliance players can simply head north from the Eastern Plaguelands to make it through the Ghostlands crossing in no time. The nice part about this dungeon is that you don't really have to worry about fighting your way to the entrance, because none of the enemies in the surrounding area will be high enough level to hurt you whatsoever. So just walk up to the city and the portal will be right inside the main entrance. Quick little tidbit before we get into the usual stuff. In order to start this dungeon, all you have to do is talk to Vol'jin near the blocked off door. From there, he'll initiate the opening of the gate and will let you proceed like normal. The interesting thing is that there is a timer that will count down from 15 minutes. If you manage to kill the first 4 bosses of this dungeon with the time allotted, you will get a mount reward. Just make sure to free each of the 4 prisoners after downing the bosses, and follow Kasha to your loot. She'll break 3 urns and drop her bag, which has a 100% chance to drop the Amani Battle Bear mount. Nowadays, you can easily solo this instance with a higher level character, but back in the day, this was quite difficult to do. If you recall the dark rituals the Drakari trolls performed to consume their Loa while fighting off the Scourge in Zul'Aman, the Amani have taken a liking to that idea and made it their own. They've sacrificed their animal gods already in order to make their power their own, greatly empowering a select few of the Amani's champions. Akil'zon was a shaman that mostly practiced with the element of wind, making him the perfect host for the powers of the Eagle God. This fight is relatively simple, though the few mechanics you do have to worry about, you really need to worry about. For starters, casters will want to stand a bit further back from the boss in order to avoid a smaller AoE he does, but you don't want to spread too far out because occasionally a player will be thrust up into the air. An electrical storm will spread out from the player, afflicting anyone not within 20 yards of said player with a massive amount of nature damage. If you stick closer to your unfortunate ally, you'll be spared from a shocking end. If you want to get down to the real bread and butter of this fight, however, it's in the ad management. Smaller brown eagles will swoop down and deal consistent damage to everyone. Luckily, these can be killed relatively easily. It's the larger white eagles you want to worry about for the most part. These Amani kidnappers will grab a player and deal 4% of their health in damage until they die. Thankfully, the grabbed player can still cast, so they can help you in killing these little fucks. Needless to say, kill all the ads as soon as they spawn, and this fight becomes impossibly easy. Like I said before, the individual bosses for this dungeon don't have much in terms of lore. Falling straight into this pattern, Nalorakk was regarded as one of the most fearsome and vicious warriors on the battlefield, making him the perfect candidate to inherit the powers of the Amani's bear god. This fight is going to turn out to be one of the easier ones for Zul'Aman, mostly because there's only 2 things to look out for, one for each phase. The boss will shift between his humanoid form and a giant bear form periodically throughout the fight, though that by itself isn't anything you should be worried about. When in his humanoid form, Nalorakk will occasionally charge after the furthest player away from him. This deals a fair bit of damage and greatly increases the damage taken for the next attack. Thankfully, this debuff wears off after a short while, so make sure that your casters take turns being the furthest away. Taking this ability twice in a row will be lethal. When the boss enters phase 2, you'll find that his bear form is significantly easier to deal with. The only thing to note here is that he can cast a roar that silences anyone that's casting. Casters take note, and you'll have almost nothing to worry about for this entire fight. When deciding who would take on the powers of the Dragonhawk god, Hex Lord Malacrass began to think outside the box. Rather than giving such a straightforward power set to another warrior, he decided that these gifts would best suit an assassin. Considering that Janali was one of the most skilled rogues in the entire empire, it was a no-brainer that he should receive them. 2 easy fights back-to-back, this one boils down to ad management, but with less burst damage than the first boss if you play your cards right. As long as you deal with the hatchers and kill the hatchlings as they spawn from the side platforms, they shouldn't be able to overwhelm you in any regard. In the last of the bosses that are supposed to stick to an animal theme, Halazzi is regarded as one of the best hunters in the Amani tribe, making him the perfect candidate to inherit the essence of the Lynx god. On your way to this fight, you'll notice that the gate is closed. Don't worry, you haven't done anything wrong. Yet. No, it's supposed to be this way. Just walk around to the right and you'll find the real entrance. As for the encounter itself, it may seem complicated upon first glance, but it's really easy when broken up into sections. The first phase is relatively normal, where you only need to worry about killing the totem the boss will periodically try to summon. At 60 and 30% health, Halazzi will enter phase 2, where he splits into 2 different entities. The troll will summon another totem that needs to be killed, and the lynx will fixate on someone who doesn't want to be caught. Just burst one of these 2 down to 20% health to return the boss to Phase 1 again. For Phase 3, at 25% health, the boss will try to summon a new totem that, I'm sure you've guessed it by this point, needs to be taken out. I could spend some time trying to explain what these different totems are supposed to do, but let's be honest here, if you're doing your job correctly, you shouldn't even have to worry about it. Malacrass is a witch doctor of the Amani tribe that was always feared for his rather dark take on the craft. For the longest time, he was ignored by his peers for methods that the Amani had deemed too extreme. However, in recent times, and with the blessings of the Prophet Zul, the Hex Lord has risen in prominence, gifting his people with power they never thought possible to obtain. And all it took was the sacrificial offerings of everything they once held dear. The Hex Lord will be guarded by a random 2 trash mobs. They do technically have unique abilities, though nothing about them is so important that you'd need to know. Just take them out first like you would any other ads and proceed to burst the boss down like normal. The interesting part of this fight comes in when Malacrass steals abilities from a random player in your party. These are usually minor annoyances in regards to new damaging spells, but things can get real ugly if he manages to target a priest, shaman, or monk for this. That's because all 3 of these classes give him various healing spells, which of course is never fun when a boss has those. The stronger heals can be interrupted, but you'll basically be rolling the dice here. My recommendation would just be to burst him down as soon as the ads are gone to reduce his chances of getting any useful abilities. When Zul'Jin was finally put down for good, there was a rather large void left at the peak of the Amani tribe's leadership. Despite what you might think, the remaining few citizens banded together with little quarreling and chose to ascend their champion Dakara to the position of chieftain. Though he is still young, Dakara is known as the Invincible for his tenacity in battle. And let's be honest, it's not like the Amani had many other choices either way. Surely they're due to run out of new champions soon enough after we take out this runt, right? This fight actually has a fair amount to it, but the funny part is, I don't really have to explain much for it. During the first phase, Dakara is a standard warrior with a few bleeds. As the fight progresses, the boss will siphon the essence from one of the 4 animal spirits around the arena. Depending on which spirit he uses, he'll gain the abilities of one of the bosses you've faced already. Toned down a bit to say the least, but it's really a diet version of what you've already faced at this point. Just take it nice and easy and think about whether ad management or focus fire will be important depending on which previous boss he's trying to imitate. The rest should be easy enough. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this episode, and if you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more like it, maybe even subscribe. Links to my social media and whatnot are in the description below. And as for the comment question, why do you think the elves of Quel'Thalas didn't bother to finish off the Amani tribe after the half-dozen times they'd already been defeated in battle? I mean, I know why, their characteristic arrogance and all, but imagine how much easier it would have been if they hadn't been so high enough on battle to let the remaining scraps of this tribe live on and rebuild after every stinking war they lost. I know Zul'Jin used to say that the Amani never die, but I think that was more due to outside forces than anything of their own doing. Anyways, what do you think? Could the Amani have survived if the elves had actually tried to wipe them out? And that's all the time I've got for today, so until next time, don't die.